Uh, I would like to welcome you today to this presentation titled Human Capital Diagnosis in a Digitized Environment, an Internal Audit Perspective. Obviously, this is my perspective. I am a practicing internal auditor and I've been so for many years. My name is Rabi Al-Khatib and I'm Lead Design and Implementation Specialist at Mobility Certius. Please find me on LinkedIn and connect. Our agenda for today will recap three major areas. The first will be a diagnosis of the challenges or risks and the better practices related to human capital. A second section will cover some digitization stories. And the third will be a recap on what would be internal audit's role in supporting the entity by protecting its most valuable resource, human capital, while playing a key role in the promotion of the digitization of activities whose automation is the only way forward. And I apologize for the length of the title, but I couldn't squeeze it into shorter words. I have this quote, and I would like to ask you a question about it. So the quote says, "Never in all history have we harnessed such formidable technology. Every scientific advancement known to man has been incorporated into its design. The operational controls are sound and foolproof." So was that Elon Musk referring to SpaceX, or was that Richard Branson referring to Virgin Galactic? Well, it was neither. It was actually Captain E.J. Smith of the Titanic prior to its maiden voyage. So I think this sets the tone for how the presentation will go. So starting with our first part, let's please agree on one thing. Best practices are not exclusively and necessarily about what others are doing. They are rather efforts undertaken within the organization itself, and that generate world-class results, probably building on an activity undertaken by another organization or organizations. And these activities undertaken by those other organizations have ignited a desire to innovate in addressing challenges, to improve a process, enhance a procedure, focus a task, or all of the above. So, just to make sure we agree on, or try to agree, reach a consensus on what a best practice is. Jasper Kunde, a well-known consultant, said that companies have defined so much best practice that they are now more or less identical. Everyone is doing the same thing. So to put some context into the exercise we're going to do now, there has been an evolution over time. We have moved from a personnel affairs clerking to the concept of human capital. So what does that entail? So initially we had a clerical reactive transactional model. This is where, all what these employees would do would be to process transactions, very minimal policies and programs. They would work based on a request for service, so they would be firefighting. So whenever we identify a need after someone leaves, they would then act. And consequently, there was no needs analysis. We never tried to analyze what are the vacancies that could happen and how could we fill them. There was then an evolution to a personnel management coordination model. And this is where we started to have limited program development, the value through low-cost service, and we started to think of other parties within the organization as customers. And we started to have the core elements of the HR lifecycle, the hire, fire, train. There's a lot of compliance embedded in it, so pretty much aligning with everything that we should align with. It's coordination and administration driven, and there was the burgeoning of some needs analysis. Then there was the progress to what we call the human resources management analysis model. So we started to have HR planning centered around the business. So what are the business requirements for now, for the long term and for the longer term? And this is how we would start planning for HR. The advanced elements of an HR lifecycle. So these are the elements that would exist in an advanced structure, such as succession planning, retention plans, and performance management processes in the proper sense of the word. HR functionality will start to be diverted into some business units. Of course, they would not take on HR roles, but they would have some. Okay. There we started to have a standalone human resources information system. So previously we had either an Excel sheet rolling around with the names of the employees and their pay scales, or we were using bits and pieces from other tools available within the business. And this is where line managers started to be held accountable for people management. So results were not the only focus, but also developing the people with whom they were. And this is probably where typically most organizations would be. And finally, we have the human capital strategic model. So now human capital as a function is a strategic corporate partner. It has business experience, it understands the business, and it can even drive change in the business by the way it recruits, the way it trains, the way it retains, etc. And this leads to improving the business results, advanced, through performance management, a proper performance management system, advanced succession and workforce planning. We have a lot of employee and manager self-service. So whenever you need a form, you don't have to call someone at HR, request it, send it, etc. You can access a system or a module and request some basic documents. This is a knowledge management oriented focus. So, it's about developing the knowledge, starts with data, data transformed into information, information transformed into knowledge. And consequently, the knowledge is spread because, as I read in a caption a couple of days ago, knowledge is strength. Then we started to have, an integrated human resources information system integrated with the ERP modules or sitting on an ERP platform. There is a significant investment in training and development. And line managers are fully accountable for people management. So a project manager is not only responsible to deliver the project on time within the budget, but also for developing the people working on that project. So we have moved from a typical support model to a more analytical approach to a strategic transition in the mindset. So this is just to put some context. So what does an agile human capital framework look like? So there are 4 pillars. I tried to give the slide, some form of direction, but these are equal. So human capital governance is 1, strategic direction, programs and policies, effective, relevant, reliable evaluation and performance measurements. And for each of those, we have enabling practices. So each of those components is enabled through a number of key leading practices. Now, there are more practices under each, but for the sake of time and relevance in the presentation, I selected ones that I considered the most important. So starting with the first component, human capital governance. What are the key challenges and risks? So again here, ladies and gentlemen, the idea is that, is to go beyond the 3-way matching when we're doing an HR audit, checking the timesheet with the contract and the payroll, or checking the completeness of the HR file. This is where we're trying to look at something more strategic. So, if I were doing an audit, for example, of an HR department, and I would look, I'll track the positioning of the human capital leadership. So one of the key challenging to having a sound human capital framework is when the leadership is reduced to a 2nd tier in comparison to a 1st tier or a CXO stature. So the human capital leadership already is not considered a peer to the C-suite. Human capital leadership is not invited to strategic and other critical undertakings. They're not considered as a party or an entity that can provide insight, feedback, and a value. And they do not sit at any relevant table, except maybe the one that decides on the colors of the t-shirt for the annual meeting. The second element are values. So this is where the corporate values are vague and inappropriately articulated. So they are subject to interpretation. Whenever they're vague, it means every employee, every function, every geography, every entity will implement them in the way they've articulated them or translated them. And this is where immediate results by teams carry more weight than demonstrated behaviors by employees. So here, we're only driven by the direct result. We're not looking at long-term behavior, even if it may have, a slight impact on the bottom line in terms of improvement. Ethics is the third element. This is where the ethics framework and related training are weakly emphasized and provided. So we do not really train our employees. Most employees have either never attended ethics training or only attended upon induction, which could have been 10 years ago. And familiarity with corporate ethics is never tested or surveyed. So it's like we're afraid as a company or as an entity to test whether our employee understand what our corporate ethics stand for and how they're implemented. So we never survey, even though it could be done easily. Finally, the fourth element is human capital vision and strategy supported by those charged with governance. So this is a case where an up-to-date human capital vision statement and articulated strategy have not been defined. So human capital is operating on a very tactical basis. There is no real direction for the longer term. And the strategic direction, consequently, on how the human capital activity will operate is provided to some degree by executive management. So, if it's the CEO or the CFO or someone who has some ideas on how they should operate, and there is no systematic corporate-wide awareness and implementation. So these are the key challenges and risks. So if I were reviewing human capital governance, I would raise these issues if they exist. And what are the leading practices? So what would I recommend consequently? Positioning, I would recommend a chief human capital officer role be established. At the minimum, a senior vice president human capital role. So this gives the human capital as a whole, a relevant role and an importance and, at par treatment with regards to the other CXOs. And the human capital function is a key part of the senior leadership of the organization. So they sit on every relevant table. Not only that, but they also have a close relationship with the nomination, compensation, and the nomination committees of the board of directors. So they have a very important role and insight to play and provide. With regards to value, the human capital function would then seek to foster an environment that looks at the employee. How? By supporting the physical, psychological, and social well-being of those employees. So values have to support that. Values have to, drive towards that and not be clearly focused on bottom line. And there is a drive for a culture change that builds on the current positives within the organization, and that could enhance the organization's capacity for change and risk-taking, and that encourage this effective decision-making, and that promote organizational teamwork. So the values are those enablers, are those facilitators towards this cultural change. With regards to ethics, training is delivered on responsible decision-making. So we train employees, especially those who have to take decisions, how to take decisions responsibly, and on how integrity and responsible business conduct tie in with organizational objectives. So, what we're trying to say is that we want to communicate to our employees that when you follow proper ethics in your activities and in your decision making, you're supporting the company ultimately achieving its objectives. How? First, by we're not subject to any scrutiny by regulators. We're not subject to any fraud, suspicions of bribery, etc. So ultimately, on the long run, everyone wins. There is a clarity of procedures by which potential issues can be raised, discussed, and reported without fear or retaliation. Any employee knows exactly who he should reach to, how he can reach to that person or to that party, use the platform, how he should raise the matters, and he or she should not be, fearful of being retaliated against. The leaders and supervisors demonstrate ethical fortitude and business acumen. So they not only talk the talk, but they walk the walk, and they demonstrate the tone at the top. And the willingness, employees are willing to report misconduct. So they're not afraid, but they don't see it just as a way to bring someone down, but rather to enhance and support the company. And they're satisfied with the way the company has treated those responses when they were validated. So whether it was a new training that was given, an employee who was subject to disciplinary action, etc. So this demonstrates to employees that we respect and uphold our ethics. With regards to the human capital vision and strategy, so it's aligned with the business. So, if we're planning to go digital, the human capital vision would not be, saying that we want to teach our employees how to become excellent Coast Guards. And it encompasses elements such as the desired culture and people effectiveness. So it's very strong. The culture concept is very strong. Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. So, it's very important to have that. And the vision is supported by senior leadership and is communicated across the organization. So, everyone knows exactly what is the vision of the human capital team or function and what it will entail for each and every one, because this transparency and visibility supports the sound environment within the company. The second element is the strategic direction. So what would be the key challenges and risks? When setting the vision, the corporate vision statement, the human capital team is not solicited during this vision statement setting. So when we have this brainstorming meetings, the human capital team is not invited and does not even participate in the business strategy formulation that is derived following the vision and mission and values, and is not even involved in the consequent implementation. So they're totally left aside. In terms of a long-term and annual human capital strategic plan, there is an absence of a human capital strategy based on organizational priorities again. So we want to go digital, and the human capital strategy talks about writing and whatnot. There are limited or no efforts to align the human capital planning process or environmental scan to synchronize with and feed the corporate planning process. So the human capital planning and the corporate planning seem to be parallel. And as we know, we've learned in geometry, parallel lines never meet. So there doesn't seem to be a congruence or an alignment in terms of feeding into the same objectives. And there is little consistency in human capital planning. What is human capital planning? Identifying the client needs, i.e. the different departments, gathering the necessary data, doing the analysis, and developing the relevant programs. And there is no real longer-term related plans. We're very tactical again. High performance culture, what would be the challenges and risks to having a high performance culture? There is too wide a gap in terms of risk appetite from one extreme to another. So if we're in one geography, department, project, or function, we have a very risk-averse culture, and in another, we have avid seekers of risk. And this creates some form of dysfunctional schizophrenia within the corporation. There is a reluctance to directly address low performance employees who are affecting this high performance culture. For some reason, we do not want to open that closet and take the skeletons out. And there is no accountability rewards for human capital effectiveness. So managers, those who are responsible for implementing human capital, initiative programs, etc., in terms of their roles, are not rewarded for that. So many of them would say, why would I want to carry that burden if there is no reward for it, right? No recognition. What are the key leading practices? In terms of vision statement, the corporate vision statements, the human capital enablers that include the various factors that to enhance the organization's ability to effectively assess, design, implement, and manage the corporate vision with regards to people effectiveness and related objectives are identified and implemented. So human capital team delivers or provides the enablers that will support the organization in achieving its objectives, especially with regards to people effectiveness and activity. And integrated human capital programs and initiatives that encourage high performance exist and are followed. Long-term and annual human capital strategy. The defined organization human capital strategy is there, and it has specific objectives and expected outcomes. So we know exactly what the strategy will deliver, what are the objectives, and obviously the objectives should be SMART. So, specific, measurables, measurable, attainable, reliable or relevant, and time-bound. There are defined metrics to measure the implementation or the success of the strategy. Winston Churchill said, however beautiful the strategy is, you should occasionally look at the results. So while we have something that looks good on paper with all the bells and whistles, it's good to monitor whether it's well implemented. There is an established employee value proposition. Every employee knows exactly what his or her track would be, how they can advance, what are the requirements, what are the options for mobility, etc. And there is a proactive and integrated approach to human capital planning, aligned and integrated with business planning. So whatever the business plan is, the human capital plan would follow that, would align with that. The key leading practices for high performance cultures. There is a results-focused culture. So we are a culture that wants results, but not at any cost. And there are clear accountabilities. So it's not just get the results, we don't care how. There is a robust knowledge creation and sharing culture where information is shared and openness and trust are fostered. So again, the knowledge creation, because we have some high-performing teams and we have some less performing teams. If you can get the knowledge that they have, that the high-performing teams are using, translate it into training, mentorship, etc., and then communicate it and convey it to those who are lower performers, we can upskill them. Conflicts and performance issues are addressed, so we not sweep anything under the carpet. And whenever the company has not fulfilled a commitment, the company announces it and justifies it along with the plan. So it tells the employees, you were supposed to do this, we couldn't do it. These were the reasons, and this is what we're going to do from now on. And there is a well-aligned performance-based reward strategy. So the third element that relates to the evaluation and performance measurements. What would be the challenges in terms of performance management measurement? Performance appraisals are completed annually, yet ongoing feedback is inconsistently followed. So we have that, that set date every year for the meetings with the bosses and, going through the performance appraisal. But throughout the year, throughout the exercise, on a periodic basis, there is no feedback or it's very inconsistent. The weighing of competencies and determining performance rating and consequently the related pay adjustments is applied on an ad hoc basis. So if you fall on a boss who thinks the fact that you show up in the morning with your tie well tied, consider this is superior performance. And someone else working 15-hour days and weekends with someone who considers that this is the basic requirements would get a a similar or lower performance rating. This is a challenge. Why? Because then it would kill the desire and the willingness to invest time and move forward. Immediate results by team carry more weight than demonstrated behaviors, as we had raised. The focus tends to be on, let's get this done, we don't care how. So your employees are disgruntled, you've been tough on the employees, you've taken their leave days without asking them, etc. We don't care as long as the results are there. There is no differentiation between low and high performers. So, you're someone who works every day, long hours, etc., and learn, and etc., and someone who does the bare necessities. The difference in reward is very minimal. So would that entice you as a high performer to keep doing that? Obviously not. Developmental plans are not consistently prepared. Again, for some reason, we don't want to highlight areas for development, and we don't want to document them and share them with employees. Maybe it's to keep them hanging somewhere and take them out whenever we need them. With regards to accountability, the key challenges and risks are line management accountability for people, human capital effectiveness, less than optimal. We don't really care whether the managers, supervisors implement the human capital initiatives and practices that they are responsible for, as long as they deliver on results. So the accountability element is missing. There are no incentives for being accountable. Why would I want to carry this load? In terms of continuous improvement, there is no rigorous or systemic review process in place. Feedback or follow-up is done informally, so by the coffee machine and the elevator, or where formal on an ad hoc context-specific basis. So it's not regular, it's not periodic. There was a specific matter, and then the feedback was provided. Otherwise, the employee may run 7 months without any type of feedback. And there is a gap between, between the human capital improvement initiatives to the long-term integrated strategy to build a business case for change. Because of this gap, we cannot really identify the elements that would supplement or feed into the business case and then drive the change to a better outcome. Monitoring results. Gaps in terms of the overall picture framework for the programs where results are tracked exist. So we don't know, we don't have a full picture. You always say, look at the full picture, take a bird's eye view, look at the comprehensive framework. Well, we don't have the results because the monitoring is weak. And there is no formal systemic approach to monitoring and measuring human capital programs and processes. So we don't know whether, we've rolled out a program where we will allow employees to come late. But we don't really measure and monitor what was the impact of this program. Was it something that the employees received well? Did they feel that because they're dropping their kids at school, this is not really an advantage, they still have to come early to the office, etc. So we don't monitor the result so that we can build on that and improve. What are the key leading practices? So with regards to performance management, we have a standard individual development plan template for each employee or job profile. So it's a plan, so it lists specific goals, assignments, training courses, projects, and other development activities with projected completion dates to add structure. So everyone knows exactly whether they fit, where they fit, what they're supposed to do, etc. It's not an ad hoc basis. Supervisors are encouraged to participate in the goal setting process, and they provide constructive feedback and not evaluation of performance strengths and weaknesses. So it's constructive feedback, they're not evaluating. One way of doing it is to identify master achievers in certain or in each core competency. Consequently, we can take how these master achievers have delivered and identified the need to meet the competency area. And we can take this knowledge and redefine what the competency should be. So it becomes more of an actual live example of what could be done versus a document provided by a consultant saying that this is what should be done. And consequently, this improves the behavior, whereas people have a more defined perspective of how delivering on this competency would look like. Notify the lowest 10% of employees or the lowest 10% of performance in each function and place them in an upskilling program to hopefully improve them. Base a percentage of employees, of managers' yearly bonuses on the management and development of low performance in their division function. So one aspect that is measured in terms of their overall performance as managers or supervisors would be what have you done with regards to their lower performance? Have they improved? Have they been delivering better, etc.? And if not, then there will probably be some form of retraction on the bonus. And ultimately transfer chronic low performance into more suitable positions or terminate and seek replacements. Of course, we do not want, we try not to terminate it, but sometimes terminating an employee is the best thing that can happen to him or her, both for the organization and for him or her, because maybe we have them in a front office role, and this is the only work we have, but they're more of, introverts that prefer back office roles. So whenever we roll them out, counsel them out of the activity, they move into a job where they can really bloom and become master performance. Accountability, program process owners are held accountable for related outcomes. And where they're accountable, there comes a time that they will be asked on the success of the program, then they will obviously be taking action throughout to ensure that they meet the requirements. And another way of measuring accountability is something called the leadership index. We anonymously survey the employees about each of the employees about his or her manager in terms of whether they feel that they're supporting them, etc. And the results of this a survey would be embedded into that leadership index that would either take up or bring down the annual bonus. Continuous improvement. So measurement and monitoring are used to communicate results. So we're measuring, monitoring, and we're communicating results. Why? So that we can focus on the target areas for improvement. We want to invest, resources are scarce. We want to invest them in the best way possible, and hopefully, laser focus on the areas that require change. This is what the measuring and monitoring and communication would help. In terms of monitoring results, core programs and processes are monitored to measure efficiency and effectiveness, and the outcomes are formally documented. We want this information. We want to do, post-program, program post-mortem, look at what was the result and how we can improve. Program policies, this is, I think, the last area. What are the key challenges and risks with regards to compensation? There is limited or no clarity in employee understanding of the factor affecting compensation increases and bonus payments. It's not clear. No one knows exactly how it happens. Pay and rewards are not tied to performance. So, you have someone who's a people's person. He sits with the boss, friends with the boss. He jokes a lot. He always has that, that good joke, etc. And somehow they get the same bonus as anyone who has been working very hard, but is not probably, spending as much time with the boss. And the difference, again, in reward is minimal. So that doesn't obviously foster a healthy environment. There is a disconnection between the bonuses paid and the entity's financial performance. So the employees would be struggling with the idea. So we're in the red, yet we're paying bonuses. So ultimately getting a bonus doesn't mean that we have to perform highly or to deliver highly, or we do not have to meet corporate objectives. And obviously this is wrong. There is a lack of creative initiatives such as reward programs. And I will talk about that in the, leading practices. And I think it could be something that could be implemented if one is willing to implement. With regards to attraction and retention, we have a large number of younger employees who leave the company because they say that they cite a lack of progression or career advancement. And we do not have a retention strategy for these employees who are actually needed so that we can keep, rolling over the blood and the workforce, etc. Internal mobility is quasi-inexistent. So if you come into a department, you're there for life until you leave. A weak employment brand exists. So because we have such a weak employment brand, it's hard for us to attract the best heads, and it's even harder for us to retain our best heads. Employees are not offered flexible work arrangements. Sometimes, employees just need this flexible work arrangement to stay within the company. They have a situation at home, they have something happening, and this would be a great opportunity. So offering such kinds, such types of bonuses can really help in retaining employees. And sometimes when we say that upon attracting, this could also help. In terms of training and development budgets are not strategically linked to the broader business goals. And this is because the training and development strategy or plan itself is not linked to corporate objectives. So again, we have a training plan that hopefully will teach everyone how to become a good Coast Guard, but the objective of the company is to go digital. So let's find the time. There is minimal coaching and mentoring. It exists on an ad hoc basis depending on the geography, function, etc. So if you're lucky, you fall within a geography or a function or a project where the leaders are willing to provide coaching and mentoring. And if you're not, you fall in an area where this is a concept that doesn't exist. With regards to training and development, again, we need to diversity, which is a very important caption and notion and element. It moves from just being aware that there's something called diversity into a better understanding of what these diversity programs entail and how they can be implemented. So this doesn't exist in the current situation. A leadership development program has not been established. So we don't have a program to develop leaders. And if we have one, it's barely implemented. And when it is implemented, does not necessarily link to the succession plan and talent management details. So succession management plan, for example, says that the chief technology officer, the CTO, is a key role, critical role that we need to maintain. Yet the leadership program, development program has not encompassed this role. So a total disconnect. With regards to succession planning, a leadership succession plan planning program does not exist, and we have not identified the critical jobs, critical or the respective career path, so that we can start, to prepare for whenever the change happens. And there is a departure from the need to ensure knowledge transfer and to invest in the development of future leadership candidates. So when employee A who held a critical role for a number of years leaves, he or she takes with them whatever knowledge we have. So we're back to square one for whomever is taking the role after them. What are the key leading practices? So compensation, again, maybe having a three-factor approach. What is that for the pay equation? So there are three elements that look into that. Obviously, market pricing. So we tell an employee, we cannot tell an employee, we know that the market is paying your skill set 20% more, but hey, you have us with our smile. This doesn't work. So we take market pricing into consideration when we're developing this pay equation. We look at individual merit-based evaluation, and I'll say later how that feeds into it, and performance competency-based evaluation. So I'm part of a project. The project, unfortunately, hasn't really delivered and succeeded. So the performance competency-based evaluation will probably be sanctioned because of that. However, as an individual, I was someone who was committed, delivered, improved, done everything I should have done well. So my individual merit-based evaluation will capture that. So there is a balance in terms of, unfortunately, I'm a very good employee. I fell on a bad team, so I'm sanctioned with them. No, this approach would take into consideration the individual merit evaluation. Employees across the organization have all the information they need on how they can progress, how they can move, what are the requirements, training, etc. The employee incentive programs are linked to business objectives. So again, we will only pay bonuses. We will only, have those investments in betterment of employee lives only where we meet our, financial objectives. What does that do? This encourages, stimulates, the employees to really focus on their work so that the whole business can meet the objectives, and consequently, they will reap the rewards also as, in terms of bonuses and betterment programs. Now, with regards to the incentive program I spoke about, maybe there could be something like a reward point program for employees. So someone who has done a very good job would get, let's say, 10 reward points, perfect attendance, 10 reward points, referral of excellent employees, 10 reward points. And then they would have something like a rewards catalog that they can redeem their points from, these points from. And what would, obviously it would not, the reward catalog would not include a Tefal pan, but maybe something like a, 1 day additional leave, maybe, things of the like. This is thinking out of the box, trying to be creative with how to compensate employees. In terms of attraction and retention, we have organization-wide internal mobility programs exist, and career mobility is regularly provided. So career mobility is not provided only when we have a new project or we're opening a new branch. It's throughout the year. And one can move laterally. So I am the chief accountant at the headquarters, but I love the sun. I would like to be in Malaysia. So yeah, there is a program that can allow me to move and become chief accountant in Malaysia. Or I can move up. So I am the chief accountant in, France, and I would like to take a larger responsibility. I can become, CFO, chief accountant for the EMEA region, etc. So these are open, these are available, and this is how we retain our employee and attract new ones. Promotions are revised systematically, and decisions are made based on workforce planning needs. We do not promote just because the year has passed. We do not promote because a time frame has passed. We promote because there is a need. We have identified the career path that lead, the pathways that lead into this development. And we have a robust competency-based performance process that allows us to identify who should be promoted. There are formal retention programs in place. So these ideas about retaining employees are drafted and formulated and approved in a program. So when we say program, we have details, we have timeframes, we have levels, requirements, etc. So it's a comprehensive set or toolkit. A strong employer brand exists. I work for entity A, and this is a strong, everyone looks at A and says, wow, you work for A, so it's a strong employer brand. And this also helps in attracting new employees, the ones we want at least. And we also have flexible work arrangements that are established and well communicated. So everyone knows if they would like to follow a flexible work arrangement, they would know what the requirements are. With regards to training and development, a learning team consisting of learning consultants and IT representatives are retained to design extensive training, online programs and development resources, etc. What does that mean? So we bring learning consultants, people whose jobs day in and day out is to develop learning material, learning platforms, etc., and IT representatives who can create, the vehicles to communicate this knowledge. So it's not just calling a manager who thinks these are the good ideas we can always pick their brains, but we would have learning consultants. And there is a tiered learning system consisting of face-to-face learning sessions, online discussion, online interactive training. So various channels depending on what each employee prefers or requires. There is a variety of career support options. We have career counseling sessions, skill assessment workshops, personal development plans, assistance, etc. So everything that develops the employee, that supports the development of the employee is there. Strategic and leadership focused training, as well as technical and operational training are provided. So if I'm the accountant, I'm not only provided with training on IFRS or IPSAS or how to close the book fast, but if I am to progress and become a leader, maybe I would learn soft skills, presentation, elevator pitch, you name it. So we have all of that in mind. It's a wide array of training provided. And assistance with tuition reimbursement based on set criteria. So sometimes, I pursue an executive MBA based on, if I meet the criteria, they will refund or finance my program. Succession planning. So we take the human capital abilities and put them in the hands of managers and employees in terms of what is the succession planning program, what are the critical jobs, what they should entail. And we ask the managers and the employees to work together and, identify the better persons, better individuals, fine tweak the system, etc. And the human capital team would only be a change agent or a facilitator. Managerial succession planning systems are implemented and they shift from position person, SORA B, CFO, X, CTO, etc., to more flexible systems that are responsive to a climate of change, which is obviously the norm nowadays, more and more. So elements include, there is a formal long-term succession plan at CXO and upper management level. We have pools of positions with common required competencies. So we say, these kinds of roles have, these kinds of competencies. So maybe we can pull them together. And again, this is a window to enhance, the succession planning program. We revisit and update the succession plans annually based on new updates. Maybe we've canceled a role. Maybe we've added a new role. After the GDPR, some roles had to be created, chief data officer and whatnot. We look outside the organization for candidates. We'd love to collect them from inside, but if they're not available inside, we have already prepared ourselves to look outside. And we have action plans for individual candidate development and obviously coaching, mentoring programs. So this wraps up the first part. Moving into, if you don't mind, we'll take the questions at the end. Looking at digitization stories. What I've done here is that I've collected some facts and figures from the World Economic Forum 2020 Future of the Workforce Report. So they surveyed companies and businesses what they think would happen by 2025. So the percentage of businesses surveyed who indicate that they're going to reduce their workforce due to technology integration was 53%. So they asked them in 2020, the report I think was issued in October 2020. So they said that by 2025, 53% of the workforce would be reduced. 15% said that they would reduce the workforce, but not necessarily for technology integration, but just for the sake of reducing them. So we already stand at 68% reduction in the workforce. It's alarming. But then there was a percentage of businesses who indicate that they're going to increase their workforce because of technology integration, and they represented 34.5%. So if we take this out of that, we're left with about 35% of entities surveyed who are planning to reduce their workforce for any reason. 50% of employers expect their employees to pick up new skills by 2025. So these are new skills. These are not skills that they have or they have at the basic level that they need to enhance, but they have to pick new skills. And this is the share, 40% is the share of core skills that they think will change in the next 5 years. So practically half my core skills will have to change within the next 5 years if I am to fit in a corporate somewhere. Now, and then there was also this very interesting chart. It shows, they asked, companies in 2018, so the black bar represents the responses in 2018, what would be the likelihood that they would adopt different types of technologies back then. And then they asked them again in 2020, what would be the likelihood of that they would implement these technologies by 2025? And the yellow bars represent the difference. So as you will see, in most cases, there has been an increase, a progression, 17%, 2%, etc. So for example, in 2018, around, let's say 70% said that they would implement cloud computing. When they were asked in 2020, they would said, about 85% said that by 2025, they would implement cloud computing. So an increase in 17%. In comparison, for example, when asked in 2018, about, maybe 38% of companies said that they would be implementing quantum computing. But when asked in 2020, on the time frame towards 2025, about 31% only said that they would implement quantum computing. So there was a reverse tendency. And this was maybe because quantum computing was not as hype as it was back in 2018, or because of other reasons. But these are just facts and figures. It's better than my opinion on what I think. So, and I'm going to share two digitization stories. IBM Watson, IBM, they were trying to develop a human brain for decades. They realized it wouldn't work, but then they said, we're going to develop a tool or a system that can understand, natural language processing and accordingly use these huge capabilities to support. And, you can watch it on YouTube. Watson challenged two human champions in the game of Jeopardy and beat them, obviously. And then IBM announced that they'll be using it to applying it to medicine, so creating an AI doctor. Now, this was done with the best of intent. The IBM had a well-respected and, it's a commitment to improve healthcare. Just imagine having this excellent tool, powerful tool that can scan, review, research, and analyze millions of papers, documents, files, and theses, and then provide, a very focused, treatment for pathologies. However, it didn't really work as predicted. And again, they're still developing and working on it. But, at the time, at least of this review, what came out was more of an AI assistant, so a glorified AI assistant versus a brilliant AI doctor. Why? Because encoding a human doctor's expertise in software turned out to be a very tricky proposition. What were the challenges? There were many reasons. One of those reasons was the fact that the bulk of the health records, so what Watson would do would go and look into these health records, collect patterns, etc., identify, interrogate, add, deduct, compare, etc., and then deliver a verdict. So a bulk of these records is unstructured information, such as doctor's notes and hospital discharge summaries. Now, anyone who has seen a physician's prescription would understand why Watson was challenged. So that narrative text accounts for about 80% of a typical patient's record. And it's a stew of jargon, shorthand, and subjective statements, so unreadable by the natural language processing processors. And this has led to a situation where initial partnerships had to be brought to a halt, such as MD Anderson Cancer Center in the US. Another thing was done. They did some comparative studies between Watson's recommendations for treatment in comparison to human doctors, and the concordance in this case, at Gachon University Gil Medical Center in South Korea, there was only a 49 concordance between what IBM recommended and by what the human doctors recommended. Again, just sharing. Autonomous cars. I strongly recommend reading this book if you haven't. So the autonomous car, we've seen it, we've heard about it, we've read about it, it's all over the place. So it stops at the pedestrian crossings to give way to pedestrians. It reads the bars, etc. It reads it. Now, so it's standing at the crossing. Another regular car, i.e. driven by a human, arrives at the intersection, signals a left-hand turn, and is planning to turn. It happens sometimes, even if it's not their priority, they do that. And, we just cope with it. The autonomous car has the right of way, so it just takes the initiative and smoothly accelerates through the intersection. It will not allow this to happen. Driving, as we all know, is a combination of continuous mental risk assessment, sensory awareness, is it training, is it windy, is there dust, is there, etc., and judgment, all adapting to extremely variable surrounding conditions in a very short time frame, typically seconds sometimes, to take a decision to brake or to speed. So looking at the scenario, the autonomous car is cruising on a highway in its rightful lane, it's in the rightful lane at the set speed, let's say 90 miles per hour. Now, in front of this autonomous car, there is an out-of-order bus with children on board on its path. So what would the autonomous car do? Will it protect the passenger by staying on course, because its ultimate mission is to respect the law and protect the passenger, by staying on course and jamming straight into the bus, potentially harming, injuring the kids, potentially leading to death? Or will it drive off the cliff on the side of the highway to protect the children, but then leading to the injury and potential death of its passenger? So this is the dilemma. Can the modules of such a vehicle assess the situation, then undertake the right decision? And what is the right decision here? Going straight forward into the bus, or going to the right, steering to the right to avoid the bus again? And this brings me to the final part. This is obviously the Internal Audit Institute of Internal Auditors Conference, so we have to talk about the role of internal audit. I will not repeat this very lengthy title that I tried to reduce but couldn't. So first, a few reminders and references. The mission of internal audit is to enhance and protect organizational value by providing risk-based and objective assurance, advice, and insight. The Code of Ethics says that the internal auditor demonstrates competence and due professional care and promotes organizational improvement. Very important. The core principles for the professional practice of internal auditing define competency as the situation where internal auditors apply the knowledge, skills, and experience needed in the performance of internal audit services. The standards, state the following: attribute standard 1200, proficiency and due professional care, says that engagement must be performed with proficiency and due professional care. So whoever is executing these, the engagement has to know what he or she is talking about. And standard 1210, proficiency, says that internal auditors must possess the knowledge, skills, and other competencies needed to perform their individual responsibilities. So even if no specific individual have them, collectively, the function must possess or obtain the knowledge, skills, or other competencies needed to perform its responsibilities. Now, Performance Standard 2100, nature of work, talks about what the internal audit activity does, but my focus is here. Internal audit credibility and value are enhanced. So credibility, so people would take us for seriously or not, and the value that we provide are enhanced when auditors are proactive. So they anticipate, they do not look at the, backwards and say, hey, we should have done that in the previously. And their evaluations offer new insights and consider future impact of objectives, of activities, of tasks, or even of recommendations that the internal audit does. So, I'm, going through several, literature and documents, etc. I found that Deloitte had introduced the concept of social enterprise in 2018. And this enterprise was defined as one whose mission combines revenue growth and profit making, because this is what the business does, with the need to respect and support the environment and stakeholder network. Stakeholder network means the community and the employees also. Stakeholders include the employees and the community. So it's an organization that shoulders its responsibility to be a good citizen. So not only driven by the bottom line, both inside and outside the organization. So inside the organization, employees, etc., outside community, vendors, etc. Serving as a role model for its peers and promoting a high degree of collaboration at every level of the organization. What does that look like? So this is like a DNA strain, more or less. So it's humanity and technology working hand in hand. So purpose, it's providing individuality, for the employees and a sense of belonging. So we do not just talk about purpose, but we also support it and feed it as we allow our employees to be individuals and give them a sense of belonging. Potential. So this is an organization designed and organized to maximize what humans are capable of thinking, creating, and doing in a world of machines. So it provides security through reinvention, security for humans through the reinvention of processes, of activities, of tools, etc. And it has perspective. So it looks at uncertainty, which is obviously the best way to reap great rewards. It looks at uncertainty with boldness. And the idea is not just to work today and do what we can and what we have, but rather, look at creating value for the future too. It's one model of doing it. So complementing and not replacing is the way to go, at least from my perspective. So there's a paradigm shift. There was a time where it was all about automation to substitute employees using RPAs or other tools. Then there was, a drive for super jobs, and then the super teams collaboration, which is where we are. So there is higher meaning for outputs and much more freed capacity for employees to think, because ultimately all these RPAs, bots, machine learning, AI, algorithm, whatever, are all made and drafted by humans. So the more freed capacity we have to think, the more we can improve, enhance, etc. So the internal audit function has to be prudent with regards to recommendation on every aspect of improvement. It has to drive value where applicable and where tasks and jobs are better performed using RPAs, bots, machine learning, AI-enabled activities, even it means a revision of the headcount. So the internal audit function must not be, play a Sister Teresa role. We have to be clear-cut that this is for the sake of everyone, including the employees. When these jobs, the only way for these jobs is to be, replaced by this. But at the same time, it shouldn't be just a drive to embrace. Someone hears in the leadership team hears about a new technology and says, from now on, this is what we're going to do. So the drive to embrace and embed technology has to follow a logic that goes beyond the bottom line. Remember the social enterprise. Because the reputational damage from mass layoffs and workforce reduction can be detrimental to the company. People will boycott, etc. Can lead to industrial action where this exists, so strikes, closing sites, etc. And potentially regulatory scrutiny, because we'll have, Ministry of Labor, all these, interesting bodies, looking into what we're doing, why we're doing that. And the more scrutiny we have, the more impediment to our activity we'll get, especially in times of crisis. So when there is already a tendency to fire and lay off people, so the shift in mindset should be here. And what does that entail? Maybe recommend the 5 points below and assist the organization integrating them into each of those domains. So elaborate.
Rabi, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are coming close to our time.
Okay.
So if you can probably come towards the winding down of the session, please. Thank you.
This is the last slide, actually.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. So elaborate a clean of the future workforce. So what is our future workforce? What would it look like? Identify the required skill sets, competencies, and capabilities. If programming is needed, we'll have that. If we need, humans, will have that. Whatever we need. Set the right resources in the optimal places via internal mobility advancement or through external recruitment. Define value drivers, what drives our values, and communicate again. So how does that translate into the domains? For individuals, invest in building human capabilities that are paramount when working with IA on teams. We need people with critical thinking, cultural sensitivity, social intelligence, etc. Train the leaders on how to manage teams with AI and humans, and how to develop these capabilities, and lead with a high degree of emotional intelligence and empathy. With regards to the organization, invest in experiential leadership development over an extended time frame to give leaders appropriate experiences so that they can lead well those teams, because it's something new. And develop a culture of doing the right thing to enhance workers' ability to anticipate AI's ethical impacts. And in terms of ecosystem, identify the partnerships with vendors and with the job market so that we can find the best heads on the market to work with us. And as a conclusion, I would just repeat what Heraclitus said in the 6th century BC: the only constant in life is change. So I think I already have 2 questions.
In the interest of time, Ravi, can you take the first one, please?
Okay. So should human capital be governed or empowered? For any human capital to work in an ethical environment, the tone at the top is extremely important. Absolutely agree. But here the governance is not, it's not in terms of chains and embottling, but rather governance to smoothen, to facilitate. Governance is like a set of brakes in a Formula One car. A Formula One car has excellent brakes to allow the pilot to drive faster, not to slow down, so that he can negotiate curves better and at a higher speed. So the governance here is not necessarily something that prevents, but rather supports and enhances, and even gives a push. And I agree totally that human capital should be empowered. And I think this is what I have reiterated throughout the presentation. The tone at the top is extremely important. Totally agree. That's why we had a specific caption that says they need to walk the walk, talk the talk, but also walk the walk. Tone at the top is essential. Employees will see what their managers are doing. If they're not doing well, they will follow lead. They will not say, they will not do something else. So can I take the second question, Ninad?
If you can make it quick, short and sweet, please.
I'll try my best. So when you mention KPIs, it's often seen the KPIs of direct line manager is very much same as that of his, her subordinate. Can you give an example of how they can be different such that we can add value addition in the process? Yeah. Oh, okay. So I don't think I can answer that quickly, but I'll just, give a few statements. The KPI for the manager would be one if, even though I'm not a key supporter of this notion per se, because of how it has been used and commoditized the KPI. But the KPI would for the manager will include obviously everything that relates to work, project responsibility, etc., but also the development of the employees. So he or she has a number of KPIs that relate to development of low performance, having stars on the team, having employees who are very well trained, etc. So this is how maybe we could have a slight differentiation between both. Now, with regards to the employees, it would be driven by the roles and responsibilities. And obviously, if they have a career development plan, we try to link what they've done with regards to this career development plan with the KPIs, because what we'll be measuring with these indicators, obviously, would be performance aspects. I can't speak any faster than that. I'm sorry.
No, thank you so much, Rabi. It was quite very informative as well. So I'd like to thank you for your time and for the very informative session that was presented on behalf of everybody here at the UAE IAA, and I wish you the very best. And I hope that our delegates attending the session will be able to make the most from the slides and from the various examples that you have given. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for attending this session.
Can I just say something?
Yes, Rabia.
Yeah, please find me on LinkedIn. I look exactly the same as you see me now. And connect with me. I love to share ideas, thoughts, etc., and use other people, leverage other people's experiences. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thanks, Rabia. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a survey link at the very top for completing the session survey. And later on, towards the end of the day, for the end of conference survey for day 1, may I please request you to complete the 2 surveys as well. We will have an hour's break for prayer and lunch, and we will reconvene in the main hall at 2 o'clock with our next speaker. Till then, ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a quick break. Thank you very much for your attendance. Have a good day. Thank you, Rabia, once again.
Thank you. Bye, Nina. Thank you.